There are stories about John Wick that even the underworld whispers carefully. Most people know the legend, the Baba Yaga, the man you send to kill the boogeyman, the impossible task that bought his freedom. They know about the puppy, the 1969 Mustang, the body stacked like cordwood in the wake of his grief. But there are nights that never made it into the stories. Gaps in the timeline. 48 hours here, a weekend there, when John Wick vanished from the grid and the Continental's records went conspicuously silent. This is one of those nights. It happened between the red circle and the church, after John had painted New York red, but before the world truly understood what they'd awakened, when he was still momentum made flesh, a force of nature that hadn't yet learned it could stop. The Continental in Prague was different from its New York counterpart, older, built into medieval bones, where the stones themselves remembered the 30 Years' War. They called it the Catacombs, and Winston had sent John there with a single phone call. "Jonathan," Winston had said, his voice carrying across the Atlantic with the weight of old friendship and older debts. "There's a complication." John had been cleaning his Glock. The repetitive motion, disassemble, clean, reassemble, was the closest thing to meditation he knew anymore. "What kind of complication?" "The kind involving your late wife's brother." John's hand stopped moving. He'd never mentioned Helen's family. Not to Winston. Not to anyone in this world. That was the point. Helen had been separate, sacred, the one pure thing that existed outside the blood and the coins and the impossible geometry of violence that was his life. Helen didn't have a brother, John said carefully. Not biologically, no. But there was a boy, orphanage in Prague. They grew up together for 3 years before Helen was adopted. His name is Mikhail Davidov. He became one of us. John closed his eyes. Helen had mentioned him once. Only once. Late at night, her head on his chest, her voice soft with old grief. "I had a brother once. Not blood, but it didn't matter. The world took him somewhere I couldn't follow. Why are you telling me this, Winston?" "Because someone else found out, and they've taken Mikhail. Left a message written in the old way, blood and implication. They're using him as bait." "For me? For you?" John's jaw tightened. "Who?" "A crew that calls themselves a pack. Ex-Spetsnaz. 7 operators led by a man who goes by Volkov. The Wolf. They specialize in pressure points. Finding what matters to high table members and squeezing until something breaks. The high table has rules about family." Winston's pause carried volumes. "They do, but Mikhail isn't registered as family. He's just another contractor. And technically, they haven't killed him. They're simply holding him, waiting to see if the Baba Yaga cares about a man whose only connection to him is a woman who's already dead." John stood. The decision was already made. Had been made the moment Winston mentioned Helen's name. Where? Prague. The Catacombs. Sharon is arranging transport. "Jonathan." Winston paused. "The pack are professionals. Soviet trained. They know what you are. This is a trap." "I know. And you're walking into it anyway." John picked up his Glock, started reassembling it with the muscle memory of a man who'd done this 10,000 times. "She loved him," he said quietly. "That's enough." The flight to Prague was turbulence and silence. John didn't sleep. Hadn't really slept since Helen. Just closed his eyes and existed in that space between waking and dreaming with a dead visit, and the past refuses to stay buried. He thought about the photograph Helen had shown him. Once. Just once. 2 children in an orphanage courtyard, both dark-haired, both too serious for their ages. Helen, maybe 7. The boy, Mikhail, a year younger, holding her hand like it was the only solid thing in a dissolving world. He used to have nightmares. Helen had said, I'd tell him stories until he fell asleep. Made up things about brave nights and happy endings. Lies basically, but kind ones. John had kissed her forehead. They weren't lies. You got your happy ending. She'd smiled. That smile that made everything else disappear. I got you, she'd said. That's better than any story. The plane touched down at dawn. The Catacombs concierge was a woman named Katia, who remembered when John had been just another contractor. before he became a myth. "Mr. Wick," she said, setting down her pen. "Your room is ready. And there's a message." She slid a card across the desk. "Heavy stock, expensive. The kind the underworld uses when words need weight." John opened it. Inside, written in elegant script, "The wolf does not fear the darkness, but perhaps the Baba Yaga does. Your Helen's brother sends his regards from Cage 7, Sublevel 3, where the old wine sleep. Midnight. Come alone or come not at all. V. Cage 7, John said. That's in the actual catacombs." Katia nodded. 17th century, before this became a hotel. Smugglers used the tunnels. There are rooms down there. Cells, really? Places where people could be kept. Forgotten. How many exits? From Sublevel 3? 1. The main stairs. That you know of. Katia's expression shifted. Recognition of what John was really asking. In this world, there are always exits. Secret ones. The kind that only reveal themselves when blood pressures the stones. "The sommelier might know more," she said carefully. "Dimitri, he's been here 40 years. Knows the bones of this place." John nodded. "I need equipment. The usual." "Of course. And Mr. Wick," she hesitated. "The pack are not common thugs. Volkov is former GRU. His men are apex predators. They've been planning this for weeks." "I know." "Then you know this is suicide." John's eyes met hers. In them, she saw something that made her take an involuntary step back. Not rage, not even determination, just absence. The look of a man who'd already died once and found that death held no particular terror. "It usually is," he said. "Dimitri was in the wine cellar when John found him." The sommelier looked up from a bottle of Bordeaux that predated Napoleon, recognized John immediately, and sighed. "Mr. Wick, I heard you'd arrived. I also heard you retired." "I tried." "How'd that work out?" John's silence was answer enough. Dimitri set down the bottle. "You're here about the boy. Mikhail. You know him?" "Everyone here knows him. Good kid. Quiet. Does his work clean. No mess. No noise. The kind of professional we appreciate." He paused. "He talks about his sister sometimes. When he's had too much to drink. Says she was adopted by Americans. Became a photographer. Had a good life." "She did. And she married a man who once killed 3 men in a bar with a pencil." John said nothing. Dimitri pulled out a wooden case from behind a wine rack. Inside, weapons. John's requested equipment. A Glock 26. A Kimber 1911. Knives. Ammunition. The sacraments of his particular religion. Sublevel 3 is a kill box, Dimitri said. 1 way in, 1 way out. Stone walls 3 feet thick. The pack will have positions crossfire, probably explosives rigged to collapse the tunnel if things go wrong. Alternative routes? There's an old smuggler's passage. Comes up through the floor of Cage 9. 2 cells down from where they're holding Mikhail. It's been sealed for decades, but... He pulled out a set of blueprints. Old. Hand-drawn. The seal is just brick and mortar. A man with proper motivation to get through. John studied the map. I'd still have to cross an open space. They'd hear me coming. Yes, but you'd have surprise. And from what I understand about you, Mr. Wick, surprise is your second best weapon. What's my first? Dimitri smiled grimly. The fact that you're already dead. You just haven't stopped moving yet. Midnight came like a blade through silk. John descended into the catacombs through the smuggler's passage. The tunnel was narrow, damp, thick with the smell of earth and old death. He moved in absolute silence. A skill learned from a lifetime of being a thing that comes from the dark. The brick seal crumbled under his hands. Beyond it, Cage 9. He emerged into a stone cell lit by a single bulb. The tunnel system spread before him like arteries. He could hear voices. Distant, Russian. The casual conversation of men who believed they had the advantage. John checked his weapons. Loaded. Locked. Ready. Then moved. Cage 8 was empty. Cage 7. Mikhail was there, 30-something, dark hair, Helen's eyes, beaten but alive, chained to a chair in the center of the cell, blood on his face, defiance in his posture, and around him, the pack, 7 men, military bearing, weapons ready, positioned exactly as John had expected, crossfire angles, overlapping kill zones, professional spacing. Volkov stood behind Mikhail, tall, scarred, smiling. "Baba Yaga," he said in Russian. "You're early. I'm impressed." John stepped into the light, both guns ready. "Let him go." Volkov laughed. "Or what? You'll kill us? Please. We're 7. You're 1. Even the boogeyman has limits." "You'd be surprised." Something in John's voice made the smile fade from Volkov's face. "This is about respect." Volkov said, "You retired, left the life, made the high table look weak. Like contract unnegotiable, like blood debts can be forgotten because a man falls in love. We can't allow that, so we took something from you. To remind you that retirement is a courtesy, not a right." Mikhail looked up, saw John. Recognition flashed across his face, followed by confusion. "You're him," Mikhail whispered. "Helen's husband." John's jaw tightened. "She talked about you." "I never knew she'd married. Never knew she'd..." He stopped. Understanding dawned. "She's gone, isn't she?" John nodded once. Mikhail closed his eyes. When he opened them, there were tears. "Then why are you here?" "I'm nothing to you. Just a ghost from her past." John raised both guns. "You're her brother," he said simply. "That's everything." What happened next lasted 11 seconds. John moved like water through stone, fluid, inevitable, unstoppable. The first 2 gunmen went down before they could process movement as threat. The third managed to fire, bullets sparking off stone where John had been a heartbeat before. John pivoted, shot, moved. The 4th man drew a knife. John's gun clicked empty. He closed the distance, redirected the blade, broke the man's wrist, took the knife, and used it. 5 seconds. For dead. The 5th gunman had positioned himself smart, behind Mikhail, using him as a shield. But John had been trained by the Ruskaroma, had learned to shoot in dimensions that require mathematics most people never considered. The bullet traveled through gaps measured in millimeters, past Mikhail's ear, into the gunman's eye. 8 seconds. 5 dead. Volkov and his final man moved simultaneously. Professional, coordinated, the kind of teamwork that comes from surviving wars together. They should have been enough. Would have been enough against almost anyone else. But John Wick wasn't anyone else. He was grief given form, love weaponized, a husband who'd lost everything and learned that when you have nothing left to lose, you become something that makes devils nervous. The 6th man died reaching for his radio. Volkov died reaching for understanding. "How?" he gasped, blood spreading across his chest. John stood over him, gun still raised. "You made it personal," John said quietly. "You touched something that belonged to Helen. I didn't know. You should have." The final shot echoed, then silence. John broke Mikhail's chains with hands that didn't shake despite the adrenaline still singing through his blood. "Can you walk?" Mikhail nodded, wobbly but standing. "You came for me. You didn't have to. Helen would have wanted me to." "She's really gone?" John's hand stilled. "Cancer. 2 years ago. She fought. God, she fought. But..." Mikhail sat back down, not because his legs wouldn't hold him, but because grief has its own gravity. "I should have found her," he whispered. "Should have looked harder. I always thought, one day, when I got out of this life, when I earned enough to be worth knowing, I thought I'd find her and she'd..." He stopped. "Did she have a good life? Before the end?" John thought about their house. The garden Helen loved. Sunday mornings making pancakes. The way she laughed. The way she touched his face like she was making sure he was real. She had 5 years of perfect, he said. "That's more than most people get in a lifetime. And you gave them to her. She gave them to me." Mikhail looked at the bodies. 7 dead men. A Shakespearean tableau written in gunpowder and blood. What happens now? Good question. John had broken Continental rules, had killed on consecrated ground without sanction. The High Table would hear about this. They always did. There would be consequences. There always were. But standing there, looking at Helen's brother, the boy she told stories to, the family she'd lost and mourned, John found he didn't care. Some things were worth the cost. Now, John said, you disappear. New identity. New life. Someplace far from this world. I'll arrange it. And you? John checked his Glock. Reloaded. Muscle memory and meditation. I keep my promise to Helen. I try to be a good man. Try to leave this behind. But maybe this is what being good looks like for someone like me. Protecting the people she loved, even when she's not here to ask. They walked through the tunnels together. Behind them, 7 bodies growing cold. Ahead, the stairs leading back to the world. At the top, Katia was waiting with the phone. Mr. Wick, it's for you. John took it. Knew who it would be. Winston. Jonathan, I hear you redecorated the catacombs. The pack needed thinning. A pause. Winston choosing his words carefully. The High Table is displeased, but not entirely unsympathetic. Volkov was making noise, operating without proper sanction. His death solved certain political problems. Another pause. However, there must be balance. You've killed 7 men on Continental ground. That requires a marker. John looked at Mikhail, the boy who'd held Helen's hand in an orphanage courtyard, the last living piece of the woman who'd saved him. What's the price? 1 favor. Unnamed, unclaimed, but when called, and it will be called, you answer. No refusal. No negotiation. And Mikhail walks free. Clean passport. Clean slate. The table's gift in memory of your late wife's kindness. John closed his eyes. Saw Helen smile. Heard her voice. Sometimes the right thing costs everything. But that doesn't make it less right. Done, he said. 3 days later, John stood at the airport watching Mikhail board a flight to Auckland, New Zealand, far enough from this world that maybe, just maybe, he could build something clean. Before boarding, Mikhail had turned back. She'd be proud of you, he'd said. Helen, for coming for me. John had shaken his head. She'd be disappointed I didn't find another way. Maybe, but she'd love you anyway. That's what she did. Love people despite their damage. He'd paused. Thank you for giving her those 5 years, and for keeping her memory alive by saving me. Now, watching the plane disappear in the clouds, John felt the weight of the marker in his pocket. Another debt, another chain. The life never let you go. Not really, but standing there, thinking of Helen's smile, of Mikhail's second chance, of love proving itself stronger than the dark, John decided some chains were worth carrying. He turned, walked back toward the terminal, toward New York, toward whatever came next. Behind him, 7 bodies in a Prague catacomb. Ahead, a marker waiting to be called. And somewhere between memory and obligation, John Wick kept walking. Because that's what you do when you're already dead but haven't stopped moving. You protect what remains. You honor what was lost. And you carry the weight until the weight breaks you, or you finally earn the rest you've been dying for. The wolves hadn't run, but neither had the Baba Yaga. And in the end, that's what legends are built from. The refusal to yield, even when yielding is the only sane choice.